The transport ship Retribution's Edge shuddered as it approached the Velthera correctional matrix, its hull groaning under the stress of dimensional fold space. Marcus Webb pressed his face to the reinforced viewport, watching the prison materialize. Like a fever dream made of crystalline nightmares, the structure defied physics' twisted spires of black crystal that seemed to bend light itself, suspended in the void between dimensions. First time seeing Velthera? Sneered transport officer. Crix, his reptilian features, twisted in what passed for amusement among the Saurian Confederacy. Most prisoners soil themselves at this point. Marcus adjusted his diplomatic collar, now stripped of its rank insignia, and managed a wan smile. It's certainly impressive architecture. Must have taken decades to engineer something that's stable. In fold space, Crix's amusement faded to confusion. In his 20 years of prisoner transport, no one had ever commented on the engineering. The docking bay was a cathedral of menace. Massive Kithrin guards stood at attention, their silicon-based, bodies gleaming like polished obsidian. Each stood nearly 8 feet tall, with natural armor plating that had evolved over millions of years on their high-gravity homeworld. Their faces were expressionless masks of duty, eyes glowing with the cold fire of disciplined warriors. Guard Captain Zethkar stepped forward, his voice resonating like grinding stone. Prisoner 7749 Delta, Marcus Webb of Terra, sentenced to 20 standard years for catastrophic diplomatic negligence. He paused, studying the small human with obvious disdain. You are now property of the Velthera correctional matrix. You will obey all directives without question. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will. Excuse me, Marcus interrupted politely, causing every guard to stiffen. I'm sorry, but I didn't catch your name. Guard-Captain ... The silence stretched like a taut wire. Several guards' hands moved instinctively to their shock. Batons. In 3 centuries of operation, no prisoner had ever interrupted the intake speech, let alone asked a guard's name. Zethkar's optical sensors flared brighter. I am Guard Captain Zethkar of the 9th Hierarchical Division. Marcus nodded respectfully. It's a pleasure to meet you, Captain Zethkar. I realize these circumstances aren't ideal, but I want you to know I appreciate the professionalism you and your team show. This can't be an easy job. The massive Kithrin stood frozen. In his culture, acknowledgement of personal sacrifice was reserved for the highest honors. This soft creature from a Class-15 Deathworld, a planet so dangerous it had spawned a species that thrived on chaos, was treating him like a respected colleague rather than a jailer. We ... Zethkar's voice actually wavered. Processing will commence immediately. As they led Marcus through corridors that hummed with barely contained energy, Guard Velnoth whispered to his partner, Did that prisoner just thank us? Impossible, replied Guard Thane. Must be a psychological manipulation technique from his Deathworld. Stay alert. But as they reached the cell blocks, each guard found themselves stealing glances at the small human who walked with dignity rather than despair, who looked around with curiosity rather than fear, and who somehow made even the most hardened warriors feel like they mattered. The revolution had begun with a simple thank you. Asterisk Marcus's cell was a marvel of efficient brutality, 3 meters by 2, with walls that shifted between transparent and opaque based on the guard's whims. The cot was a slab of formed polymer, the sanitation unit a hole in the floor. Most prisoners spent their first week screaming, begging, or plotting futile escapes. Marcus spent his first morning doing stretches and humming quietly. Guard Velmoth, assigned to the morning shift, found himself staring through the transparent wall. The human's movements were fluid, almost dance-like, completely at odds with the rigid despair that usually filled these cells. Prisoner 7749 Delta, Velmoth called through the comm system. Explain your behavior. Marcus paused mid-stretch and approached the barrier. Oh, good morning, Guard Velmoth. I was just doing some basic exercises. On my homeworld, we learned that maintaining physical health helps mental resilience. I hope I'm not disturbing anyone? Velmoth's mandibles clicked in confusion. You know my name? Of course. You introduced yourself yesterday. Is your shoulder bothering you again? I noticed you favoring your left side during the shift change. Ugh. Guard's optical sensors dimmed with shock. His chronic joint pain was a carefully hidden Shane Kitharan culture, demanded physical perfection, and admitting to weakness could mean demotion or exile. How could you possibly? I spent 15 years in diplomatic service, Marcus said. Gently. You learned to read body language. On Kepler 442b, I worked with the Arthropod Collective for 2 years. Their joint structures are similar to yours, though less efficient. They taught me that silicon-based physiologies often develop microfractures from repetitive stress. Velmoth found himself leaning closer to the barrier. The pain has been getting worse. Would you like me to show you some exercises that might help? They're simple adaptations of techniques the arthropods developed. Nothing that would compromise your duties or dignity. For the next hour, Marcus guided Velmoth through a series of subtle movements designed to relieve pressure on crystalline joint structures. The guard's skepticism gradually gave way to amazement as decades of chronic pain began to ease. This is ... How do you know so much about so many species? Velmoth asked, his voice softer than regulation permitted. Marcus smiled. When you spend your life trying to build bridges between different worlds, you learn that everyone human, Kitharan, arthropod, everyone just wants to feel understood, to feel like they matter. When Guard Captain Zethkar made his rounds, he found Velmoth standing straighter than he had in years, with an expression of something dangerously close to contentment. Report, Guard Velmoth. Prisoner 7749 Delta remains compliant, sir. He ... Velmoth hesitated. He provided information about joint maintenance techniques used by the Arthropod Collective. The data appears ... useful. That evening, Zethkar reviewed the security footage with growing unease. The prisoner wasn't manipulating or threatening. He was simply ... caring. And somehow, that felt more dangerous than any weapon got. As the ship's cycles continued, word spread through the guard ranks. The strange human remembered their names, asked about their families, and seemed genuinely interested in their well-being. It was unprecedented. It was disturbing. It was working. Asterisk, the Kitharan hierarchy had stood for 3 millennia on the bedrock principle that duty transcended individual needs. Personal connections were weakness. Emotional bonds were chaos. The guards of Velthur were the purest expression of this philosophy. Warriors who had surrendered their names, their individual identities, to become perfect instruments of order. Marcus was unraveling 3,000 years of conditioning with homemade cookies. These are called snickerdoodles, he explained to Guard Thane, passing a carefully crafted treat through the meal slot. I managed to synthesize most of the ingredients from the nutrient paste. The cinnamon is actually ground up vitamin supplements. Thane accepted the small offering with trembling hands. In his culture, sharing food was an intimate act reserved for blood relatives. I cannot. It's just a cookie, Marcus said gently. You mentioned yesterday that you missed the taste of the crystal fruit from your homeworld. This won't be the same, but sweetness is universal. The guard bit into the cookie, and his optical sensors flared with something that might have been joy. For a moment, he wasn't Guard Unit 7 Alpha of the 9th Hierarchical Division. He was just Thane, remembering his spawning grounds and the simple pleasure of flavor. How ... How did you know about the crystal fruit? You had this look in your Eyes when you talked about your homeworld. The same look my grandmother got when she talked about her mother's apple pie. Loss is universal too. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm. Emergency protocols engaged as the prison's AI detected an anomaly in Guard Section 7. Within minutes, Guard Captain Zefkar was striding through the corridors, his expression thunderous. He found half a dozen guards clustered around Marcus's cell, sharing stories about their homeworlds, while the human listened with rapt attention. Guard Velmoth was demonstrating the traditional Kithran greeting dance. Guard Kess was showing holographic images of her offspring's first crystallization ceremony. Guards, Zethkar's voice boomed like an avalanche. Return to positions immediately. The guards scattered, but the damage was done. For the first time in centuries, the rigid hierarchy of Velthera had bent. Prisoner 7749 Delta. Zethkar approached the cell, his massive form radiating authority. You will explain this disruption. Marcus looked up from where he'd been sketching portraits of the guards' families on pieces of scrap material. I'm sorry, Captain. I didn't realize we were being too loud. The guards were just sharing some wonderful stories about their homes and families. Guard Kess's younglings sound absolutely delightful. Guards do not have families, Zethkar stated flatly. They have genetic obligations and hierarchical responsibilities. Oh, Marcus tilted his head. So when Guard Velmoth talks about his offspring struggles with the academic trials, or when Guard Thane mentions missing his spawning pond, those are just ... obligations. Each word hit like a physical blow. These were things the guards had never shared with their commanding officer, intimate details of their suppressed personal lives. You are manipulating them, Zethkar accused. I'm listening to them, Marcus replied. There's a difference. That night, Zethkar stood in his command center, reviewing security footage with growing alarm. The human wasn't using any recognizable interrogation techniques. He wasn't offering bribes or making threats. He was simply ... present, available, kind, and it was destroying everything. Part 4, the Velthera Paradox. Crisis began with a birthday party and nearly ended with a revolution. It started innocently enough. Guard Velmoth had mentioned, during one of his increasingly frequent conversations with Marcus, that his hatching day was approaching. In Kithran culture, the anniversary of one's emergence from the spawning crystal was a private matter acknowledged. Briefly, then forgotten. Marcus had other ideas. We should celebrate, he announced, as if it were the most natural thing in the galaxy. Celebrate? Velmoth's optical sensors flickered with confusion. I do not understand this concept. A party. Music, food, decorations. A gathering of friends to mark the joy of your existence. The word friends hung in the air like a dangerous spell. Kithran had no equivalent term, only hierarchical designations and functional relationships. Marcus set to work with the determination of a man who had spent 15 years navigating alien diplomatic protocols. He convinced the kitchen staff to let him modify the nutrient paste into something resembling a cake. He crafted decorations from recycled prison materials, strips of colored plastic woven into patterns that mimicked the aurora displays of Velmoth homeworld. Most importantly, he invited the other guards. This is unprecedented, muttered Guard Thane, but he came anyway. Highly irregular, agreed Guard Kess, while helping to hang decorations. Completely against protocol, stated Guard Zix, as he practiced the human custom of singing. When Velmoth arrived for his shift, he found his section transformed. Makeshift banners proclaimed, "Happy Hatching Day," in 17 different languages. The other guards stood in an awkward circle, holding gifts they'd crafted in secret, small tokens of appreciation and friendship. For the first time in 3 centuries, the halls of Velthera echoed with laughter. Marcus had fashioned a crown from scraps of metal and plastic, placing it on Velmoth's head with mock ceremony. By the power vested in me, by the Galactic Council of making people feel special, I hereby declare you birthday Emperor of Block 7. The guards applauded another human custom they'd learned, and Velmuth stood there, 8 feet of crystalline warrior, with tears flowing down his face. I do not understand, he whispered. Why would you do this? I am your jailer, your captor. Marcus smiled, because you're also my friend. And friends celebrate each other. That's when the alarms began. Prison Command had been monitoring the situation with growing horror. The perfect order of Velthera was collapsing into chaos, not the violent. Chaos they were equipped to handle, but something far more insidious. The guards were developing individual personalities. They were forming emotional bonds. They were beginning to see prisoners as people rather than inventory. Emergency protocols engaged. Riot suppression teams deployed. The celebration was declared. A Class Alpha security breach dot as armed guards surrounded the impromptu party. Marcus stood protectively in front of his friend's guards, who had become something more than their programming allowed. Stand down, prisoner 7749 Delta, commanded Security Chief Raxther, his weapons powered and ready. You are under arrest for inciting rebellion, corrupting prison personnel, and violation of the emotional suppression protocols. Marcus looked. Around at the faces of the guards he'd come to know, Velmuth, with his chronic pain and pride in his offspring, Thane with his homesickness and surprising artistic talent, Kess with her fierce protectiveness and hidden gentleness. I haven't corrupted anyone, he said quietly. I've just reminded them that they're alive. The tribunal was a masterpiece of bureaucratic theater. Chief Administrator Kolthara presided from her crystalline throne, flanked by the highest ranking officers of the correctional matrix. The charges against Marcus filled 17 screens of dense legal text. Prisoner 7749 Delta. Kolthara's voice resonated through the chamber like judgment itself. You stand accused of the most serious crime possible within these walls, the systematic corruption of our perfect order. Marcus stood in the defendant's cage, still wearing the makeshift crown from Velmuth's party. The guards who had testified against him under direct order and threat of court-martial stood in rigid formation, their expressions carefully neutral. You have introduced chaos into a system that has maintained flawless operation for 3 centuries. The administrator continued. You have caused our guards to develop individual personalities, to form emotional attachments, to question their fundamental programming. How do you plead? Guilty, Marcus said simply. The word sent ripples of shock through the chamber. Prisoners always pleaded innocent, or claimed diplomatic immunity, or demanded lawyers. They never simply admitted to crimes against the system. I'm guilty of treating people like people, Marcus continued. I'm guilty of listening when someone needed to be heard. I'm guilty of caring about individuals in a system designed to erase individuality. Kolthara's optical sensors flared. You admit to corrupting our guards? I admit to befriending them. Is that corruption in your society? Yes. The administrator's composure cracked. We have achieved perfection through the elimination of personal desire, individual need, emotional weakness. You have introduced chaos. Marcus looked around the chamber, at the guards who had become his friends, at the administrators who saw order as more important than humanity, at the system that had confused control with civilization. Administrator Kolthara, he said formally, I invoke the right of cultural exchange under Article 847 of the Galactic Diplomatic Accords. The chamber fell silent. The right of cultural exchange was an ancient protocol, almost never invoked. That allowed representatives of different species to present their cultural values as a legitimate defense. I am a human from Earth, a Class-15 Deathworld, where survival depends not on individual strength, but on cooperation, on caring for each other, on recognizing that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker, He gestured to the guards. These warriors you call corrupted, they haven't become weaker. Guard Velmuth solved 3 prisoner disputes last week through mediation instead of violence. Guard Thane's section has the lowest recidivism rate in the prison because he helps inmates prepare for release. Guard Kess discovered she has a talent for rehabilitation counseling. They have become inefficient, Kothara protested. They've become effective, Marcus countered. Your perfect system has a 97% recidivism rate. Prisoners serve their time and return to crime because they're treated as inventory, not people. My friends here have learned something you never taught them, that rehabilitation works better than punishment. The guards stirred. For the first time in centuries, they were being called effective for reasons other than their ability to inflict order. In human culture, Marcus continued, we have a saying, the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. You've created individual wolves, but you've forgotten that a pack is stronger than any one member. He turned to face the guards directly. I'm proud to call you my friends, and I'm proud that you've remembered how to be proud of yourselves. The tribunal lasted 4 more hours, but the verdict was never in doubt. Marcus was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to immediate release, because in the end, even the most rigid system couldn't argue with results. The corrupted guards had reduced violence by 60%, improved prisoner satisfaction by 800%, and created the most successful rehabilitation program in galactic history. As Marcus walked free, escorted by guards who had become friends, he carried with him the knowledge that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to an oppressive system is simply treat people like people. Behind him, the Velthra correctional matrix began the slow process of transformation, not into chaos, but into something far more radical, a place where justice and humanity could coexist. The revolution was complete, and it had started with a simple thank you. The end author's note. This story explores how genuine human connection can be the most subversive force in the universe, demonstrating that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do to an oppressive system is simply treat people like people. The power of emotional intelligence, empathy, and basic human kindness to transform even the most rigid hierarchies reflects real-world examples of how small acts of recognition and care can create profound change.